jump into ChatGPT and AI for social workers. So first, just a few introductions. So I'm Alex Mitchell. I've been a product person at a few different technology startups. What that means is I work with engineers who actually build a lot of the products you may use out there in the world. So think website builders, think other technology offerings out there. Everything you kind of use on the internet is built by folks like me working with computer engineers. So that's my background. I've also founded a couple companies, including Agents of Change, the one who's hosting this webinar today, along with my wife, Megan, who's the other host today. And I'm really just passionate about new and emerging technologies. So obviously ChatGPT and AI fits right in that interest area of mine. But more specifically, I'm interested in helping as many people find value in those tools as possible. I really get it. Like, these tools can be intimidating. They can be a lot to digest, especially when you start throwing around words like artificial intelligence. It tends to scare some people away. So I really hope today, Megan and I together can kind of reduce that fear, make these tools more accessible, at least give you a couple ideas for where you can get started, and not make it as scary as it may be right now. So before I throw the mic over to Megan, I would love if folks could put in the chat kind of a 1 to 5. How do you feel about your understanding of AI or ChatGPT today? Maybe 1 being, I'm very scared about it. I don't know anything about it. I'm worried. I don't know where to start. And maybe 5 being, I could teach this class right now. I know a lot. I know a lot of details. I could, I tell my friends about it. I tell my coworkers about it. 1 to 5, where are folks at right now? Okay, I see a couple 1s in there. So you've come to the right place. Okay, a 4, and I saw a 3 earlier there too. 2, Megan 4 also. Thanks for putting that in there. So yeah, again, you're in the right place. We're gonna make this not scary. We're gonna take our time as we go through here. We're gonna try not to use any jargon or any confusing terms. We're gonna make this really accessible for you today. And again, you're gonna walk out of here with some more knowledge. You're gonna walk out of here with a few, hopefully practical things you can use in your social work practice. So with that, that's a little bit on my background, but I'm not a social worker. So that's why I'm pairing up with my wife today to bring the social work perspective to this technology challenge. So Megan, I'll throw over to you to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Mitchell. Some of you may have seen my face or heard my voice before if you're familiar with Agents of Change. I founded that in 2020. And on top of the many things that I do, I also am in private practice. I started private practice. I'm in a group private practice working with children and adolescents, mostly age 5 through 18. Prior to that, I worked in the schools for a very, very long time, almost a decade. Addicted to learning, which is somehow how I ended up in this learning more about ChatGPT. I'm always learning new things. I'm currently in a DSW program at University of Buffalo, and me and Alex, we both live in DC. We've been here for about 10-ish years, but I am originally from Michigan. And I said I was about a 4 in my comfortability with ChatGPT, and that is only because I am married to someone who works in tech. Otherwise, I would have 0 tech knowledge. But so this is why we kind of wanted to bring both of us together today, because it's really the perfect, let's say, marriage of our 2 backgrounds. And he has helped me become really efficient on ChatGPT and found ways to kind of help me, assist me, and utilize the tool. So I'm hopefully that you guys can take some stuff away today that will be able to help you. I use it every day. So now I can't come off the ChatGPT train.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, super excited to pair up with you as well on this one. It does feel like the perfect topic. So with that, I think we can jump in. So a few areas we're going to cover today. One, I'll give you just a very brief introduction to ChatGPT and AI. The main point is just to give you a few kind of bullet points of understanding of how these tools work, which will help you understand some of the limitations with them too, when they don't work like they should, which is really important. Then we're going to jump into ethical considerations. Before we even use the tool and show you how to use it, we want to cover ethics. Very, very important part of AI in general, but even more important for AI and social work. So Megan and I are going to kind of cover both parts of that, just AI ethics in general, but then very specific things you need to watch out for as you're applying it in social work. Probably the most important thing you'll take away as you start to use these tools. As we get to kind of the second half here, we'll talk about just how you can actually leverage ChatGPT. We'll talk about these things called prompts. Might be a foreign word to you. It basically means what you type in the box before you hit enter in a tool like ChatGPT, and how you can really get the most out of what you put in that prompt. And we'll actually go through some prompts together. We'll put them in together. We'll see live how it's actually working. We'll see if anything kind of surprises us about what we get back, and we can talk about that. So the demo will be kind of how we end. We'll cover a few different topical areas. We can also take questions from the audience to put into ChatGPT. But hopefully, again, we'll demystify this for everyone and get everyone comfortable, at least giving this a test after this webinar. So jumping into just...
Don, Alex, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, I moved myself over there. So jumping into understanding AI just at a high level, I think we all know AI means artificial intelligence. But again, we don't really think about sometimes what that means. It's trying to mimic the way that we think as humans. So, it's not just, as humans, we don't think in math problems. Like, we're not always just doing computations in like an Excel sheet, right? We're doing more complex problem solving. Maybe in social work, we're trying to find the right resources or treatments for a client. So when you think about AI, it's trying to operate in a similar way that human minds work, where they connect these details together. Again, different than the way that computers have historically worked. That's why it's kind of this new frontier. But guess what? You're already using a lot of systems today that used AI and have used AI for probably more than a decade. So some simple ones are like recommendations. So you watch some Netflix programs. Those Netflix programs have certain characteristics, maybe think like horror movie or British or things like that, that then Netflix tries to guess, what's Megan gonna like to see next on Netflix? And it gets better and better. As Megan watches more, the model, the artificial intelligence can predict more what Megan would like. So we all use that every day, right? Social networks, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all use artificial intelligence to try and, again, predict and provide content that we think is going to be relevant. And then a few other ones here, not to go through these all, but AIs and things like voice assistants. So you might think, we all have different accents when we ask for things from Alexa or from Siri. We might ask in different ways. Hey, what's the weather? Is it sunny out? Is it raining? AI has to interpret all these different ways we ask essentially the same thing to be able to provide us the information we need. Of course, then there are other things like self-driving cars. It gets more complex, of course, but just again, AI trying to mimic the way that we as humans can answer these kind of complex, fuzzy questions. So that's AI. And then ChatGPT, obviously the kind of new kid on the block here, the main thing we're talking about today. We're not going to go into all the details of the model and things like that, but basically the way ChatGPT works is, if you imagine you could take all of the internet, maybe all the books in the world, all the libraries in the world, all the information that's ever been written by humans, and you put that in a computer. And then that computer, you can ask questions. And it's going to try and look through all that information of what humans have done before and try and give you an answer that's appropriate. So it's a ton of data. It's kind of the most data that's ever been collected in humanity. That's what makes it generally pretty effective. And that's why you can also ask for things in a certain way. You can say, I'm a social worker and I'm solving this problem with a client. It will know to look for certain types of content then in that case and speak like a social worker. You could say, I'm a doctor and I'm trying to help a patient. It's going to speak in that way. Or, hey, I'm a 5-year-old, explain something, rocket science to me very simply, right? It can adapt in that way because it has all that information. So that's all you really need to know is ChatGPT includes all that information And that's for good or bad. Think about the entirety of the internet, right? There's some good things out there, and there's some human bias. There's things that, are not the best. And sometimes those can sneak into the answers that we receive. So we'll get to that in a second, but that's one thing to kind of be careful about, knowing where this information comes from. So that's just a little bit on AI and ChatGPT, just to give you that kind of bit of background you need to understand some of the limitations. And so let's jump into ethics. So I'm going to give a little description on ethics overall for artificial intelligence, and then Megan's going to take it down to social work. So really at the highest level, AI ethics involves things like fairness, transparency, so understanding where these answers are coming from, accountability, some way to say maybe, hey, this answer is wrong, you need to fix it, and harm reduction. It shouldn't actually make things worse, right? It shouldn't give you answers that make things bad. Megan and I were actually just talking about this before, and Megan commented something really insightful. There's no one regulating AI right now. Like, there is not an agency saying, you know what, your answers are not good enough. You have to go fix that before you can actually sell this to the US public or to the world public. There's no one kind of checking and balancing these systems right now. It's happened so quickly. There's no agency, there's no government that's really kept up. So all of these ethical standards are really just ideas for now, things that we need to, as kind of social workers and humans, campaign for. We need to say that these systems do need to be regulated. They're really, really powerful, and if they're wrong, they can cause harm. So again, some of these things are a little theoretical right now. That's one of the kind of scary parts about AI. And so again, what we're trying to do as social workers and as humans is use AI in a way that respects human rights and values. It promotes the things that we care about. It makes things better is what we're aiming to do here, obviously. So that's kind of what we're talking about with AI ethics. We talked about, fairness. We want it to be equitable, right? We don't want it to reinforce inequalities that might be out there on the internet, biases that might be living out there. I mentioned transparency. We should know the sources where AI information comes from. And if you don't see the sources, again, this is a point where you maybe want to take a breath. You want to go check some information and say, okay, this is what the model said, but I'm going to go check that online and find some scholarly sources to back that up. Accountability, again, we mentioned, unfortunately, there's not a lot of accountability here right now. So you need to be careful. You're the accountable one, not necessarily these companies. And then harm reduction, again, that's us. That's us as social workers and people, to make sure the information we're providing is helpful, is harm reducing, or harm preventing, not creating harm. So again, those are just a few of the AI principles, but I'm going to pass up to Megan to take this down into social work and share some specifics on how this fits into some of our ethical principles in the world of social work.
So like Alex said, AI is this big thing and people are pretty much going crazy over it. It's just taken over, but there's no oversight, and a lot of people aren't even trained on it. So I have clients, teams going on it, and they're using it and they have no idea where the information's coming from. They have no idea if it's accurate or not. So I always like to say, when using ChatGPT or different bot like this, I guess we can call it that, you really have to put the personalization into it, right? You don't want to just copy and it gives you information and you just push that out, copy and paste. To me, I use it more like a search engine, right? So I pretty much go there more than Google now, and we'll do that in a demo. But as social workers, we're in a unique position because we do have a code of ethics that we have to uphold. So like, luckily we have this umbrella thing that's helping us that kind of can guide what we're doing, but that's not the case. And I also want to preface that the people that make ChatGPT are definitely not social workers. So they're not thinking of these things. They're not thinking of ethical dilemmas and equity. They're just thinking there's this really cool piece of technology that we're going to put out there. So this is my push to say there needs to be more social workers making these things, and we need to be more on the forefront of technology. But that's for a different discussion. So what are some things as social workers when we ourselves are utilizing ChatGPT? or we are working with clients that might be bringing up that they're using ChatGPT. Data privacy. So confidentiality is always going to be the most important thing, right? We never should put clients' information into the chat box, right? So we should never use names. So if I'm ever using it, I will say an 11-year-old client. I won't even give more information than that.
That's one really important thing that Megan just brought up there. You know, how I mentioned that they took basically the entire internet and think of all the books ever and trained. Actually, because it's artificial intelligence, it's also using all the information you enter to try and get better. So as Megan mentioned, if you put client information in there, you know, that could potentially show up in another context as someone queries. It's probably unlikely, but you don't want to take that chance putting this confidential information in there. That's not a good idea. So yeah, just wanted to kind of double that back and connect to it uses that information too.
Yeah, so that's a huge thing. We think of how intrusive it would feel if our information, people were asking ChatGPT to do stuff on our behalf, putting our names in. We wouldn't like that, right? So there's not a lot of transparency on what happens when we put this information in. So just be very, very mindful to keep it very surface level. And you should not be having this like reports for you with clients' information and all of that. So always important to protect client privacy, because there's too many unknowns right now, and you could get in a really sticky situation if clients' information is divulged. Informed consent, right? We should not ever be using ChatGPT for purposes of our client without their consent. So there might be a time where you have to actually sit down with a client and use ChatGPT to teach skills, right? So I could see doing this with some of my teens, right? But I would want the parent to know. I work with children. I want the parent to know, and I'd want them to be able to know that I'm doing this with them in session. So I would need consent to do that. Potential biases. So think of, there are biases in technology and information biases. So what is out there? What comes up highest on a search, right? Are all marginalized perspectives captured in the data? I don't think we know enough about that yet. And think of quote unquote fake news. That's still getting put into the ChatGPT bot. So you might get some really bogus thing that pops out. That would be where the human aspect comes in, because you need to be able to say, okay, this is not helpful for me. This totally sounds bogus. But let's think about that for a second. A teenager, they might get this and they're not going to think, oh my gosh, this is totally outrageous. This must be pulled from a source that's not credible. What happens then? They think that is fact, they use it, and it just perpetuates misinformation. Over-reliance. There is a big question about, are people going to become too dependent on this, right? People are freaking out that it's going to take over jobs. If you've been following, there's that screenwriters strike right now because they're thinking that AI is taking over a lot of their writing capabilities. So there's a lot of people that are really worried right now, and for good reason, that we just don't know enough yet. So where's the boundary of what is too far versus like what's a good balance? And I say, just like anything, moderation, right? You might have some clients that now are using it so much that they are isolating themselves. They're like, well, I feel like I'm talking to a person, even though they're talking literally to software. And they might start to isolate, or we don't know yet if there's going to be addictive. People are getting addicted to different aspects of it. We don't know that yet. Transparency is a big one to think about. We don't know where the transparency is. So if you ask a question, it's not going to tell you the citation or where that information was from. So you really have to like double check that this is accurate. But like I said, I use it more like Google. Like if I'm asking, tell me about the wildfires in Canada, it's going to give me some information. I can probably use my best knowledge, my best judgment to know if this is solid information or not. And then inequality is a big one. Also, I want to say this is something we have not talked about, and people aren't really talking about it, but our marginalized populations and people of color involved in the technology that's making ChatGPT. I don't know because there's not much transparency. So we want to make sure that we are also thinking of that, and inequalities and who can access this, right? It's free, but you have to have internet. And then there's a paid version too. Not everyone's going to be able to have access to that. Does that just perpetuate injustices even more? So just things to think about in terms of our ethics. Biggest thing here, it should not replace your professional judgment. That's when we get into the really scary territory, when we're not thinking for ourselves, we're letting ChatGPT think for us.
Yeah, and so one thing I know we mentioned is just this is all happening so fast. Our hope, Megan and my hope, and we've seen some, signs of it so far, is that the companies will be responsive to some of these concerns. I know on transparency, for example, I think Google's version of ChatGPT called Bard, B-A-R-D, has started to cite sources. So you can see some response to these things. It's probably not going to be overnight, but again, as folks can kind of say, like, hey, we really do need standards around bias and some, ways to understand how that's, in the data or not in the data. We need some transparency as people campaign for this, and we can be part of that. We hopefully will see it more in the tools we use. But for now, we need to be pretty cautious.
So I'm going to pose this as a discussion question, and you can just type your answer in the chat. So this is just an example. So it says a predictive AI tool, we'll say ChatGPT, is being used in your agency to assess the risk of reoffending among individuals recently released from prison. You find out that this tool uses demographic information such as zip codes, which can be a proxy for race or socioeconomic status, potentially leading to biased outcomes. Okay, so here's the thing. You will work at an agency, you're saying, you are using it as a prompt and you're saying, I want to know the demographic information of individuals that were recently released from prison. And it gives you information. It's going to pop out like tons of information. What risks do you see that could potentially be problematic, I guess, for this scenario? And how might there be potential bias that affects the data that comes out and how you use this data when you are using it to inform how you work with clients or service delivery? So, and this does not have to be full sentences. You can go ahead and just pop that in the chat. But like, what could be problematic about this? That you're just like, give me information of individuals recently released from prison. Your population might be very different from the population ChatGPT is trained on, right? What information is it pulling from? Confidentiality, safety of the client. Absolutely. What if you live in a super small town and there's like, a very small population and that is very skewed? Is the data up to date, right? Think of like census data and stuff, right? That's not like, real time. So is it pulling stuff that is outdated? What else could be problematic here? How could this potentially like be biased information? What's going to probably happen if we put this in? Cities generally have more, crime because they're bigger, right? And it might just be very targeted to particular neighborhoods. And what happens when that is the case? That just perpetuates biases, right? Yeah, someone said it might lead to make decisions that actually harm the client because we're prejudging them. Oh, you're from this zip code and there's tons of people that were released from prison. So what is that going to tell us to think in our head, right? We have to actively try to avoid some of those biases. We don't know what crimes these people committed also. Like, we know that the criminal justice system has a lot of problems too. Like, what is a crime? What is recently released? Like, what does this mean? This could mean so many different things. So you can't, I would say in this case, you should not do not use this as a prompt, because this would not be helpful. It would just give you some very basic data that would not be really helpful to use in an agency setting. And Alex, I don't know if you want to like touch on anything else that could potentially be bad with this. I think people had good ideas, but it could potentially be very problematic.
Yeah, I think you've touched on a lot of them. I think a lot of great ones in the chat, and I think people picked it apart pretty well. It's almost each piece of this is a potential weakness or area that you don't understand. Again, it's kind of described as a black box sometimes. So if you don't know where the data is coming from, how it's coming to the answers it's making, it can be pretty dangerous to then try and make very consequential decisions like how should we treat people that we work with, or who should we prioritize? That can be very risky if you don't understand the way that it's working. So I think some great points brought up here.
Oh, someone said that given this example, I think of clients who may be gang affiliated coming out of the prison system, and that can put them at risk. Absolutely. There's a lot of implications of this. Think of if you are doing this and maybe it has ties to employment, or we don't know what the offense was, right? It just can really be very damaging to someone if you're using this to kind of make assumptions about someone. And that's all it is an assumption. So thank you for sharing that. So how can we've talked kind of in a negative light, but let me tell you, ChatGPT has been very, very, very helpful for me in a lot of ways. So I'm in grad school right now. I do agents of change, and I'm in private practice, and amongst the 10 million other things that I'm doing. So it helps for efficiency in a lot of areas. So what can we use this for? Communication. We don't use, this is not ChatGPT specifically, so I'm going to talk AI broadly, but think of if maybe you are interested in running a private practice, or not even that, maybe you work for an agency. Have you ever interfaced with a chatbot that's like, hi, how can I help you today? Those are used all the times, right? Or it's like, how can I help you? Pick 1, 2, 3, or 4, so it can kind of get you to the right person. That's really effective, right? It might be able to do some steering people in the right direction. So websites use chatbots all the time, right? And that's what it is. It's using AI, it's using all that data to be able to give you information. Because oftentimes, like, it's like almost like an FAQ. Here's our most common questions that come up, right? Alex brought up a good point. Say that you are in an agency, I'm just thinking of this, and you said, I need emergency assistance. They can say, if you are in need of emergency assistance, here is boom, 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 what you can contact, right? That could be something that's helpful. Like if you need emergency assistance and you need it, like the information put out to you, that could be a good way. So predictive, it could be able to triage people. That's depending on how you use it, but it would have to be confidential, of course. But like I said, doctors' offices, things do this already as we are, right? You take a survey, what are your symptoms today? And that can be done by AI, right? And sometimes it can be used within the practice if the data is protected. So if this is a chatbot or AI used specifically and built specifically for organizations, it can be really helpful. Just knowing that the data would be protected. Learning resources. I use this a ton. So if I have a particular client that I'm working with, like I might type into ChatGPT, I might say, give me some resources for technology use for a 13-year-old. And it's going to give me some stuff, and it's going to be pretty broad. But maybe I want to go a little bit deeper, right? So maybe I want to say, what is recommended screen time usage for a 13-year-old? And it might give me some more information. So you can keep making the prompts more specific, so it gives you information and it might give you something. Or I could say, I'm trying to think of an example. Say I am working with a client and they are really into Star Wars. And there is a client that I work with that's really into Star Wars. And they are always telling me these names of these characters, and I have no idea. I can go to ChatGPT and say, give me the basics of Star Wars. Who are the main characters? What are the main planets? What are the main things? And it pops it out for me. And then I can make a really nice connection with that child, right? And I don't have to go watch the whole Star Wars trilogy. I can get that information quickly. So I'm learning, right? And it's giving me some information.
And I was going to say, I think that kind of sounds, as Megan said, sometimes like a trivial example. She's talking about Star Wars, working with a client, but obviously so much about it is building that relationship with the client, kind of demonstrating that empathy, that caring for them. And so one of the kind of the easiest tricks you can do with something like ChatGPT is maybe as you're putting together those resources for a client, you can personalize them. So Megan can say like, but tell the story as a Star Wars character or something like that, or tell me, these breathing things I can do, but as a Star Wars person, like to manage my anxiety. You can do these little twists on it, and it could be Star Wars, it can be, you name it, pop culture. And generally ChatGPT is pretty good at that. Remember, it's been trained on everything. It can speak like that. It can take on the character names. And it's just a way to, again, to reach those clients with, maybe a method that appeals to them more. Just a kind of a really cool story that Megan's experienced.
Therapeutic support, and this is just more general. So you could say like, please give me ChatGPT, provide a guided imagery for a client experiencing anxiety. And it will give you actually a script that you can use, which is really helpful. Or give me a journal prompt for a 8-year-old who's struggling with anger, right? And you don't have to copy and paste, and you shouldn't copy and paste, but you're like, I really like this one, right? So I think I'll go with this. It saves a lot of time because it's going to give you ideas, and you get to pick and choose so that's the part that I like. It's like, I'm super creative. So I'm like, oh, I like a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And it just helps me generate ideas when I'm feeling a little stuck. So I think that's what's really helpful. And then emotional support. This could be if someone maybe is just looking for resources or information, right? We would hope that they would have knowledge on it, but they're like, maybe a geriatric client's like, I am experiencing loneliness or grief. What are some resources that they could give you? They might pop out like, here's Meals on Wheels in your area. Here's this, and this, which could be helpful. Or also like, you can ask some like questions. Is it normal that I'm feeling depressed that I just retired, right? It might be like, oh, I'm too embarrassed to ask that to maybe a peer, but I would feel comfortable asking it to ChatGPT. Think of with our teens, we've talked about some negatives, but maybe they're like exploring their sexuality or their gender identity, and they don't feel comfortable asking anyone, but they want some information or some resources. They could put that into ChatGPT, and it could maybe take some of that stigma or shame away from them. So now is another discussion. Have you used AI? And it does not have to be ChatGPT. It can be, chatbot or anything maybe your agency or private practice uses. And if so, this does not have to be for social work. Where do you think, or where have you seen AI could be helpful? And you can also answer, has anyone in your practice talked about ChatGPT? We're definitely talking about it in my private practice. We're small though. We're maybe 15 clinicians or so. Yes, create a therapy directory bio with the help of ChatGPT. So how much time did that save you, right? It's absolutely amazing. It's awesome. And the thing that I like to say is some people in academics and whatnot are like, is it cheating? No, we're still putting in the work. It's just making things more efficient, right? It's like, don't recreate the wheel if you don't have to. Ooh, that's a good one. Creating a schedule for a team on site. So Alex, can you give an example of what that prompt would be that you'd say, give me a schedule?
Yeah. And so I think just one of the things you'll see as we actually start throwing some prompts in is the more information you can provide, generally the better answer you get. And so in my world, obviously it's more tech than social work, but my team had a 3-day onsite, and I plugged in, I said, here's my team, here's what we do, here's the type of product we work on, and here are our goals. Here's our 3 goals that we want to accomplish in this onsite. Can you please put together a schedule? I think I said between 9 and 5 with coffee breaks and lunch breaks included, that both helps us achieve these goals and build better relationships together. So even had some like team building things in there. So again, you can treat it like you're talking to a human, and generally that's the best way to get the most out of it, is giving it that same context you'd give a friend who may be planning that on-site, or a coworker. That's kind of the way you talk with it. And it worked well. And like Megan said, not everything's right in there, but you maybe like 80% of it, you say, hey, give me a different activity instead of this on Tuesday. And you get a few more ideas, and you kind of work it until it gets to a point that's good for you. But that was my example. Yeah.
Yeah. And then someone in the chat said they've not seen or have anyone near them speak about it. I think that's the case. So in my doctorate program, they're very heavy on technology. That's kind of also how I got into tech. And we talk a lot about social workers are usually so reluctant to get ahead of technology. And that actually puts us behind, right? Because other people are embracing it and they're figuring out ways to make it work for them. But think of social work, like there were so many other professions that had moved to Zoom before we did, right? I know some like psychologists and psychiatrists that were doing virtual sessions for a decade. And I'm like, what? I didn't even know you could do virtual sessions till COVID hit. And so I just think it's really important that we have these conversations and we're aware, because it's out there in the world, right? We can't avoid it. We can't hide from it. So we might as well, make it work for us and make it work for our clients, because I think that we should be the ones making decisions, because we do have that empathy. We do have the knowledge of how to better rights for the most vulnerable people. So that's my soapbox of like, yes, hire more people. And there actually a lot of tech companies are starting to hire not necessarily social workers, but yes, social workers or people who do have diverse backgrounds that are not necessarily computer engineering or something, because they bring a really good perspective. And Alex is not a social worker, but you can talk quickly about how like you work with me and you've gotten a lot of new perspectives that I push you to see with certain things.
Yeah, and I think that's honestly one of the other things we didn't talk about as a benefit of ChatGPT is it can help you strengthen your understanding of things, but also maybe understand your blind spots. You can type in like, hey, here's again, protecting confidentiality, but hey, what's the other side of this issue? Or what's the other perspective that I may be missing on this topic? I think this thing, but I know some of my clients don't. Can you explain, maybe some of the things they're thinking about or some of the evidence they have? So that's actually one way we use it in my work, obviously in a different context, but hey, what are maybe the things that could go wrong here? What are maybe some of the things I don't know? So hopefully it can kind of give you a more holistic perspective too.
Alex, there's some questions in the chat, which I think are good ones, and you work in tech, so you'll know better than me. What are some job titles that would be like, they're not going to be called social worker, right? But like, I'm thinking of what some of the areas, I know they're working in like corporate social responsibility. Meta, I know hires social work folks to do more like global access and working with underserved countries. But what would be like some possible things a social worker could do in a tech company?
Yeah, I think some of the ones that just pop into my mind immediately are the ones that, obviously we saw really blow up in COVID. So ones like BetterHelp, think of like the apps that connect you to therapists. Obviously, I'm sure they're, already in AI and trying to, kind of have that help provide answers, whether that's via chat or maybe tools and resources for their therapists to provide their, their clients. So I would think, kind of any mobile app in the mental health space, in the wellness space, in the mindfulness space. Those are probably where you tend to find them. As Megan mentioned, of course, some of the bigger tech companies like your Googles, your Facebooks, likely have some social workers there, but they might have a few. They might help out with AI. They might help out with ethics. They might help out even just with team dynamics and teams working together well too. So if you're at one of those big companies, it might be more broad, but I would say especially all those mental health apps, I think you'd find a lot of folks in social work or with therapy backgrounds working in AI.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes macro skills lend very well to this. Yes, you can be a therapist on BetterHelp, but there's actually people behind the scenes that do. And also this is another problem that we could talk about forever, is a lot of these companies were started not by people in the mental health space. So we need to be sitting on boards and we need to be advising and really doing the work to kind of give a more informed perspective. So I would say if you're interested in this, just poke around, and just because it doesn't say like the title is social worker, right? That don't let that limit you. Like we have so many skills. Think of people skills, we have problem solving, crisis skills. Like we have such diverse skills that could be used in any setting. And I think technology would be a really great one that you could do as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think now we can jump into some actual demos of ChatGPT. So one thing we wanted to share before, and I think you probably aren't surprised by seeing this disclaimer here, but just wanted to share, we might see some things that are not right here, right? That definitely could happen. Again, you are the professional. You are the one kind of taking this information, interpreting it, not copy pasting it as Megan said, but actually choosing the parts that make sense, refining the parts that don't, or eliminating those. Always use your judgment. That's kind of the disclaimer here. So again, we might see some of that here. We might not, but we should always keep that in mind. So I am going to go ahead one slide here, and we'll share these materials after, but we will also share a link to a course that includes a lot of these prompts that can kind of get you started. And so the way that Megan and I usually think about these prompts that we've shared is there's a prompt. So that's what we're actually going to start by pasting into ChatGPT and hitting enter and seeing what happens. That's that first bar there. This prompt is kind of in the psychoeducation and resources bucket, kind of topical area. But then there are customizations. So as you've heard, as I've described, we talked about the Star Wars example. It's obviously a little bit of a sillier one, but there are other ones that might say, a geography, you name the state that you're in. That's usually a great customization. You might name a specific type of anxiety disorder in this case to get, specific resources. Just again, things that make it a better answer that you're going to get back by giving that information up front. And then there's limitations. So, with each of these, we tried to share just some of the quick limitations you should be aware of, but hopefully those are going to kind of be in your head now that we've talked about them for a bit. So I am going to jump out of presentation mode here, and we're going to go grab that text that was just in here. And I'm going to go over to
what website to head to how does it ChatGPT work? What if they're brand new? What should they do?
So I'll just delete this piece out, but you can go to chat.openai.com and you can actually sign up for it. Pretty simple, just providing your email, creating a password. That's about it. And you'll be able to access pretty much exactly what you're seeing on my screen right now. It's not that fancy. You might not have all these bells and whistles that we have because this is a paid account, but you'll be able to see something very similar. And you'll be able to start what they call a chat. So each one we're creating is just a chat, and we can see some of the chats that we've done in the past here. So you have a little bit of a history, but that's basically it. It's not a fancy tool in appearance. It's really all that power kind of underneath the hood, the engine of it that really makes it special. So that's it. You can really just go to chat.openai.com and sign up for this after. There's also one that Google has that I mentioned before called Bard, B-A-R-D, that you can check out as well. So without further ado, we're basically just going to drop in that prompt that we had. So provide educational materials on coping strategies. So let's imagine we have a client with an anxiety disorder, and we've decided that we want to kind of create some relaxation techniques that they can practice, and maybe some self-care they can do, some other things that potentially could be considered as part of helping this client. But again, we're gathering resources right now, and so we're going to hit enter. And ChatGPT, it sometimes can take a few seconds for it to actually generate a response for you. So, it might not be an instant response because it actually has to run all through that data that's out there. So you saw there, it took about 5 seconds before it started putting together the answer. So, I'm not going to read through the whole answer, but we'll kind of narrate as we're going here. So it's giving some relaxation techniques. So deep breathing, muscle relaxation, mindfulness, meditation. We also asked for some cognitive restructuring techniques. So maybe here are some other things like reframing that we can consider, look into more. And then again, those self-care practices. Again, this is all going to be pretty general to start because we didn't give it a ton of information. We didn't say this is a 10-year-old client that we're working with, or this is a teen struggling with depression that we're working with. Like, we didn't give it that level of information. So generally, we're going to see pretty high level information provided back. So as you can see, it's still kind of cranking away here with these details. But maybe I'll put out to, if folks in the chat, if folks can think of like, what's a customization that we could give? Like, what could we tell it to kind of customize the answer it gave back, make it a little bit more specific than the information it's giving right now?
So something I learned that I'll just throw out there is you can say limit it to 250 words or limit it to 50 words. So it's going to give you forever and ever. It's going to keep going. So you probably need to stop generating at some point. But then say, give me this in 5 bullet points.
And let's zoom in and let's say, maybe give me 5 bullet points for relaxation techniques for a teenager. And let's see if we get anything interesting back from there. But Megan's bringing up a great point. With each of these chats that you have, it has a memory. You don't have to give it the same information again. You can say, that's great, but make it shorter. That's great, but do this instead. Okay, add more to that. Give me 5 more things on that topic. You, again, can talk with it just like you're talking with a human. And so we could say here, okay, we got now 5 bullet points around relaxation techniques tailored to teenagers. And maybe we could say, what are some resources available in Washington, and I guess we could type that right, Washington, DC for mindfulness and yoga. So let's just see if we can get that level of detail. And so it actually can bring,
this is real because I have gone to Flow Yoga Center and Yoga District.
Yeah, and so one thing that's again a little interesting too with at least ChatGPT is sometimes information can be a little out of date. It's not up to the minute. They use data from a certain point in time. Again, one of the limitations. So let's say a place opened up down the street. It might not be in here yet, right? And so it still is subject to those types of limitations.
Like here it said something like, please check COVID-19 protocols, right? Because that's probably the most up-to-date stuff. So you might get something that like says masks are required in the establishment because they don't have updated stuff. So just know here's a live example. And I know Flow and Yoga District are open. I have no idea if those other ones are legit or what, but.
Yep, definitely. Yep. And so that was, again, kind of topic number one here. Again, just more resources. Again, you can tailor it to specific, client ages, needs, anxiety disorders, et cetera, et cetera. Again, you can customize as much as you can possibly think. Again, just keep confidentiality in mind. Only give it those kind of details that cannot be matched back to a client.
I have a question. Maybe does anyone have an idea of something that we could feed it? Because we've played around with this a lot, but maybe if you're brand new, you're like, I think I could use this for blank. Go ahead, pop that in the chat. I'd love to know, and Alex, actually that question, what are some of the job titles you would look for a job in AI or technology as a social worker? Mariah, let's see what that pops out for us. Ooh, he went even further.
Yeah, so just a little bit of information about types of companies. It recommends OpenAI. That's the company that makes the tool we're using right now, which is interesting. So we'll pause and we'll go back up to the information here in a second once it's done writing. But you can see also it does acknowledge some of its weaknesses sometimes. So the data only went up to 2021. So it's saying, hey, I don't know maybe about some of the new companies out there. But you can see some of the things it's highlighting. It's connecting that social workers care about ethics is what the model's doing. And so it's saying, these companies maybe could be a good fit because they're committed to ethical AI use. So again, not perfect, but that's the connection it's making. And then it's giving a few things. So Mariah, if you actually want to pursue this, it's saying, hey, some of these are the things maybe you should consider building out in your skill set to make you a good candidate for those positions. And you could go further here. You could say, okay, let's go further. Create a 3-month schedule for me to build these skills and be a great candidate for one of these roles. And so it'll break it down for you week by week. And you could even ask day by day. You could say, give me an hourly schedule. But it'll even recommend, as you can see there, I know it's going by quick, some of the specific courses out there that you could take. Some of the different things you could consider for maybe, it says even informational interviews. You could reach out to folks in the field. And again, you kind of see how this snowballs a bit. You could then say, okay, how do I reach out to people in the field? What's a message that I can use to engage a professional and try and get a coffee or a conversation with them? You're able to kind of just build off of that. And so it can really help you, again, build those steps to get, over some of those anxiety, challenges you may have if you're in a new area like this.
I can give an example of one I used today. So I have a client who loves the sand tray. So Alex, can you feed it sand tray prompts for a 12-year-old? Focusing on critical thinking. Let's see what comes up. So this could be really cool. Think of it, right? I could say this with the client. Imagine an island in the sand where you've become stranded. You have to use the miniatures. Those are the little things you put in the sand to represent the challenges they might encounter. So food, shelter, communication. How might you overcome this? Right. And then these are kind of just like sentence starters for them, or the journey path, the magic forest, the future city. Like I wouldn't have thought of this on my own, but now I'm like, okay, I have somewhere to take this. I have somewhere that I can go with it.
Yeah, and so to Megan's point, you could obviously think of those questions yourself, or you could, maybe get a few of the kind of different parts of those questions by just digging deeper here. So it can get pretty detailed, rescue strategy, planning ahead, resources. But again, that can really, if a kid is very engaged in that sand tray, that could really get a lot out of the activity for them, which is very cool.
And I'm actually thinking this, I'm like, oh, I should ask some of these things. Like this is sparking for me things I would not have other thought of. And notice here, yes, we're using AI, we're using ChatGPT, but we're the vehicle. Like I am, or you, or whoever is the one utilizing this. So, right, this is maybe a client that's trying to work on problem solving, critical thinking. What's the problem? What solutions do we have? What might be the consequences of what you selected or not, right? How did you prioritize what you're going to have on Problem Island? What resources do you think already existed there? Like I'm thinking for executive functioning, this could be so cool. I'm like, want to get down into the weeds of it. Does anyone else have anything they'd like? Do not be shy. Is there anything else that please speak now or forever hold your peace of like, or you can just say, I work with generally this population and we can kind of come up with a prompt for you. Give people a moment in case they're typing. I have one that has come up. So we'll end on this one because I'm just totally geeking out on this now. So I've had some parents that don't know when's an appropriate time to start talking about boundaries with clients, and they don't know how. They think it's awkward or they avoid it. So Alex, can you give it a prompt for a parent of maybe a tween, maybe like let's say a 9-year-old, on how to talk about boundaries?
Boundaries between the parent and the child.
Yep. So we're going to help the parent with this conversation. And the parent's like, help, I don't know what to do. So let's see what comes up. I have not run this yet, so I have no idea what's coming up.
So we'll pause it in a second here so we can scroll up.
Yeah.
So it looks like kind of the part one is understanding the perspective. So I guess gathering that information, Megan, about what's working today, what's not working today, what they're doing today. But what do these other ones resonate with you, or what anything stand out?
Providing education, obviously, but if you actually look at the little info it gives at the top, it says some parents might be resistant because they feel their child knows best. That's a really important point for me to think of, right? It's like, they might be like, my way is the way to do it. So I might get some parents that are resistant to doing that. I'm trying to think role playing, right? Like, so what if your child says this? Like, how are you going to respond to it? So building some of those skills, providing resources, of course. And a lot of times this might be really obvious, right? It's like, okay, I know this, but it just gives you some ideas of what to do. Yeah, and then it says,
maybe we can dig a little bit deeper on that resistance areas I could expect from parents when having conversations around boundaries. So again, this is one of the things I talked about before, is just trying to help yourself know what to expect, and kind of be ready for that other side, maybe that other opinion that's not your own, but could definitely be from your clients or other folks you work with.
So this is great. Parents might feel criticized or judged. They might fear they're being too strict. They might not have the knowledge. They might not know about They might have some misconceptions. They might fear their child will have negative reactions. I mean, these are all like possible things that can just help us be more prepared to go into that conversation, right? We're not going to bring out the script and say, hold on, parent, let me ask ChatGPT, right? It's just now I know, like, okay, I can prepare myself and position myself to be prepared and know like how to answer these tough questions that might come up. So I think this could be really helpful for that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And you could almost like imagine, you have your game plan going in for that initial conversation when you're gathering information, you have this background, and then maybe after that conversation with parents, you return to this and you say, oh, you know what? It was actually some inconsistency between the parents that seems like the main driver. The kids are getting mixed messages. One is setting good boundaries, one's not setting good boundaries. And so that's where I need to dig in. And so maybe I can come back here, I can add a few more questions, I can start working through what a plan would come together to maybe help those parents get on the same page and understand each other's perspectives and work from there. So again, as you're hopefully feeling here, it isn't just a one-off, I ask a question, I get a perfect answer. It's, I get, some things to think about. I get a framework. I get some things to try, some things to test, and I maybe come back to it and I adapt and I make it better and I customize it. And that's really, I think, what Megan and I would like to leave you with today is, like any tool, it's a tool. It's not perfect. It's not going to solve all of life's problems, unfortunately, but we think it can definitely help you, and it can help clients if used in the right way. Again, used ethically, used with limitations in mind, and used transparently and with consent and all of those things we touched on before. So I know we're up on the hour, Megan, here. I can go back to the slides here. I think there were a few last comments we wanted to share before we wrap up today. One thing that we wanted to share, if this was engaging and interesting to you, or you just want to learn more, we do have a free course available with many more prompts, with more information, with some great videos that kind of dive even deeper into all of these topics. So you can check that out at bit.ly/AI-social-work. You can also find it if you just look up Agents of Change Continuing Education on Google. You'll find our homepage and you'll see the ChatGPT course right on there too. So we'll share this out after, but if you had a little bit of fun today and you want to try some more, definitely sign up for this free course and we'll help you become at least a 3 or a 4 on the scale that we started with. But Megan, I'll pass off to you for one last thing around continuing education before we wrap up.
Yeah, so we are really excited. We have continuing education courses now through Agents of Change, because we want this to really be, maybe you used Agents of Change for your social work licensing. You're licensed now, you're out in the world. So now what? We want to provide continuing ed. So we are constantly getting new people to come in and provide continuing education content. And we're going to have a whole library of stuff to offer. So I'm going to put in the chat. Maybe I'm not going to put in the chat because maybe it did not copy. In a moment, I will put in the chat. If you are a social worker and you have an area of interest that you want to put on our continuing education platform, we are always looking for, it can't just be me talking up here the whole time. We're really better together as a community. So if you're interested in being a content creator, or you're like, I'm really interested in the veteran population and I'd love to share this knowledge with other people, please, we have an interest form that I have to find here. Let me get it for you. But we'd love to have you either record content or do a live webinar and be included as part of our continuing ed platform. So I'm going to put that link here.
Yeah, and as Megan said, we built quite a huge community of social workers, and so you can, get your name out there, you can get your topic out there, you can build kind of your personal brand along with Agents of Change. We really want to help people reach this big population of really almost 15,000 social workers out there. So everyone usually has a niche topic that they're focused on. Obviously, we touched on AI today that I'm passionate about, but really encourage folks to check that out. It's not very intense to do. It can be as simple as Megan said, recording a webinar, doing an interview in some cases, a podcast. We're open to a lot of different formats, but we'd love to have anyone from this group as a creator.
Yeah, and if you're ever interested in doing your own private practice or going out on your own, or I don't know, going to grad school, like this is a great way to just say, I have put content out there for others to learn. So you don't know if you can do it till you try. I know I was super reluctant, and now I'm like, now too many people are asking me to do content things. So definitely check that out. And we will continue to have cool new tricks that as the tech evolves. I'm sure Alex will have his eye on that. So hopefully we'll have more things to share with you. And if you know people that would find this helpful, share this out. Like we don't want people to be not talking about AI. We don't want social workers to be like, what are you talking about ChatGPT? I'm not going to go anywhere near that. We want to be part of the conversation, and we want to help elevate this so that it can, as you can see, it can be really helpful. So yes, thank you everyone for tuning in. And I guess my last thing for those of you that are still with us, what number would you say you are now of kind of like understanding what AI is, and particularly ChatGPT? So did you gain any knowledge today? Yeah, I see some of you went up, and it's actually really fun. I think I'm very playful, so that's why I like it. But take some time and check it out and see how it could benefit you or how you could use it. If you have children, you don't even have to use it, right? Make a schedule for my child during the summer, because I've had some parents say that, like, they're just so bored all day. What can you do? ChatGPT might be able to give you some.
I've seen people use it for grocery lists, for I have these things in my fridge, what recipes can I make? It's very flexible. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Or if you're a traveler, I'm going to Mexico for 10 days in this area. What should I do? It's there to make your life easier. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this. And if you're interested in learning more, I mean, Alex and I will always jump on a call to talk about this, but we'd love to connect, and we'd love to learn more and dive a little bit deeper into this. So maybe we will build this out to like a longer, if we can get it approved, a CEU course as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Thank you for all the ideas and feedback along the way, and have a good rest of the night. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.